Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Learn with Jason. Today on the show, we've got Ryan Chenkie. Ryan, thank you so much for coming on.
Absolutely. Excited to be here.
Yeah, so tell us what you're working on. Like, what's your story these days? When we first met, this was years ago. I believe you were working at Auth0, and
Mhm.
you've since gone. Is it independent?
Yeah, since gone independent. So we met in late 2017 at GraphQL Summit in
Yeah,
San Francisco, and I was just in the process of wrapping things up at Auth0 and moving to do my own thing full time
yeah.
at that point. And so I've since been doing that. So it's been about 2 years. I think I just hit the 2 year mark actually on the 1st of November that I've been independent. So what does that look like? It's a lot of consulting for various companies. So I've got a decent client roster. I think I'm like at 6 or 7 active clients right now.
Oh, cool.
I've got a lot of teaching that I'm doing, so releasing products like books and video courses and that sort of thing. And aside from that, doing a lot of speaking, doing a lot of conference appearances, that sort of
Mm.
thing. So mostly everything to do with code and trying to keep a sane schedule where I can.
Yeah, for sure. Awesome. So one of the things that you're working on is called Graph Collective. Do you want to talk about that for a minute?
Yeah, for sure. So I got into GraphQL probably mid 2017, maybe early 2017, and I started learning everything I could, of course. And as I ran into people who weren't doing Graph Collective yet, I started to kind of see some patterns as to why people might be a bit both excited but also a bit skeptical, at least in terms of how GraphQL might relate to the organization they're in.
Mm.
And a lot of those patterns I was seeing revolved around being kind of uncertain about it being because it's a newer technology. And
Right.
we see lots of logos of companies that are doing GraphQL, and these are some big companies these days, right? You've got companies like PayPal and LinkedIn and Airbnb, lots of great companies, but people are still a little bit skeptical as to what adopting it at their organization might look like
Sure.
and whether or not it's a good idea. So I wanted to try to give back to the community by giving some case studies that highlighted those people who have kind of gone through that journey,
Mm.
and have them talk about the benefits, have them talk about approachable ways to adopt GraphQL, ways that are a little bit, less maybe organizationally potentially catastrophic,
Yeah.
and figure out how I might communicate that info to folks who are curious about GraphQL. And so what I decided to do was put together a series of interviews, and it's really just kind of the first batch is wrapped up now. There's only one tweet up on the Twitter page that you've got up right now, but if
Mm.
you go to the website graphcollective.io, if you click that link, for now that's just a redirect here to YouTube where there's some other
Okay.
videos up. So we got folks like Tanmai from Hasura, Kyle Matthews from Gatsby, as I'm sure you know him, and so, some other folks too. There's other videos that are just being finalized now that will be put up shortly.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea here is to kind of give some info from those who have walked the walk with GraphQL.
Nice.
And my hope is that I can, with your help, get a bit of a website together to showcase these, maybe with some profiles about these people, some written content, written info about what they're talking about in the videos here, maybe some
Yeah.
transcripts and that sort of thing.
That sounds like something that's very in line with stuff that I've been working on. I've actually so like we can pull a lot from this show
Okay.
because this is a effectively a list of like a YouTube episode with some details.
Excellent.
And then if I was responsible, which I'm fixing this, please don't come after me. The transcripts would be posted.
Awesome.
But so yeah, this is something that you would be able to. We could just kind of follow a lot of these. But what's interesting about this is that there's another thing. Now we talked about Nest.js a little bit before we
Mhm.
came on this show, but I actually don't know. Is this your project, or is it like? Can you talk a little bit about what it is?
Nest itself, or more in Graph Collective?
Well, so Graph Collective, that's yours, right? You're doing an
That's
interview
mine. Yep.
series. And then Nest.js
Right.
is this something that you've been working on, or just something that you're stoked about, or?
Something I'm stoked about.
Okay.
This is a framework for Node that is built by a guy out of Poland named Kamil, and he's got a team behind him too. But
Okay.
started by Kamil, and Kamil comes from the Angular world, as I do. That's sort of how I got into this and how
Oh,
I know
okay.
him. And it's a really, really cool way to build servers in Node.js that follow some of the patterns that you would see in Angular. So that might kind of scare people off immediately because a lot of people these days may not be super into Angular. I still do a lot of work with Angular, and I'm seeing lots of companies have really good success with it. But Nest gives you a way to essentially write an express server, because all it does at the end of the day is it
Whoa.
wraps. I got some flickering there. Um,
Okay.
all it does at the end of the day is it wraps Express, but gives you a TypeScript layer and kind of an abstraction that makes your application sort of look and feel like an Angular application. So if you like TypeScript, especially if you like Angular, but even if you don't, it's a really nice way to build servers, and it's got a lot of the stuff that you need to do in any given server already
Okay.
figured out for you. Um,
And so is the
yeah.
idea with
So
this will kind of operate as a REST or GraphQL server layer. It's not intended to be
yeah.
a view layer.
Uh, more or less, yeah. You would use this mostly for if you're building an API for an
Okay.
application, for example.
Okay.
So, perhaps the need for us here to use something like Nest or any kind of server for the kind of data we'll be consuming in the application we build for Graph Collective might not be a super strong, justification for it, but it'll give us, I think, an opportunity to explore Nest a little bit deeper. I've done some of the stuff with their REST stuff in Nest.js. Haven't
Yeah.
worked a ton with their GraphQL stuff, but I have seen it a bit, and so I figure if we can get to a point where we're building a GraphQL server, especially for those who love GraphQL, it shows us a different way to approach it. It does wrap Apollo, wraps Express, but it's going to give us a layer that I think is kind of nice to work with, especially if you like TypeScript. So I figure this
Cool.
might be a little bit of maybe a contrived case for us building a server, but let's do it anyway.
I mean, I found with the Learn with Jason stuff, I ended up standing up a headless CMS. I use Sanity
Okay.
because it just made it so much easier than me trying to, orchestrate this data from different places.
Yeah.
Plus, I found that there were things that I wanted to add that were just like not available, and I really didn't want to get into using like the file system as a
Yeah.
database, because I feel like every time that I start that way, it outgrows it, and then I'm really upset that I have to go manually migrate a bunch
Yeah.
of flat files into a database somewhere. So I mean, maybe it's maybe a little overkill to start, but I honestly think this is cool if you can get it set up without, you know, without a huge amount of overhead, and it sounds like that's kind of what this is designed for.
For
So
sure. Yeah.
so maybe the way we can approach this is, let's see if we can get Nest set up, because I've never worked with Nest, and then you said you've never worked with Gatsby.
Correct. Yeah.
And so what I thought would be kind of fun is maybe we can do a handoff midway. So I'll try to get this Nest.js stuff set up, and you can teach me how that works. And then
Sure.
we'll just switch, and you can share your screen and pull down the Nest API that we built together, and then work on a Gatsby site with that.
Yep. I
Awesome.
think that's great.
All
Let's
right,
do it.
cool. So let me build a new folder. We're going to call this graph.
Actually, before you do that,
Okay.
it's going to build a folder for you. So
Oh,
I'll show
okay.
you, yeah, how that sort of works. So I guess first step would be to install the CLI, and you can get to that if you go way up to the top in
Oh.
the first quick start.
In the first quick start, like here.
The introduction. Yeah, I think if you go down, maybe it's an overview actually. It might be an overview there.
Oh, here it is.
Oh no, there you go.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So I use Yarn. So I'll do a Yarn global add Nest.js/CLI. Okay. And
So
so
that'll install. I find newing up a project takes maybe like 30 seconds after you have the CLI installed.
30 seconds. All right, team, we're going to get ready with the elevator music.
Yeah. Decently quick, but it does take a sec.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things that I've been thinking about a lot, and that I think is a really interesting concept. I'm trying to remember who initially talked to me about this, but was the idea of like, you can be slow and inefficient when you do the server side build, or when you do like a pre-build versus a like runtime build, because that wait time is on you, not on your users. So like, you know, obviously you want it to be fast, but like you get to, you don't, it's not quite as imperative if you're like, oh, it's a little bit slow to download all these packages, but like the end user gets this blazing fast experience. And you know,
Right.
Oh man, I just used blazing fast in a sentence. I am the hype train today.
You are indeed. It's blazing fast.
Okay, so we've got, come on, little compooper. We created this and move. Okay, so I'm gonna move into it.
CD in, and then once you're in there, you'll do your well. Before you do that, you got to install. So do yarn. I guess yarn, right?
I don't know. It's telling me that it did it already.
Interesting. I saw another spot where I had to npm install after I cd'd in. Maybe it's done.
Let's see what it did. Maybe it's gonna yell at us. We'll find out.
We'll find out shortly here. I think we're good.
Interesting. Okay. So I have no idea what's going on though. So what I'm probably going to do is open this and let's look at it.
Yeah, let's look at the application that you just started. The server does go up at localhost 3000. So to interact with it, that's where we'll go.
Okay. So let me get it started. And then we'll hump over to here.
I believe you should get a hello world message if I remember correctly. Let me first start this up.
Cool. Okay. So our server's running. Make that a little bit bigger.
Server. Maybe one thing we can do just right off the bat is we've started it with the node command essentially. That's what we've done there. But to watch for changes, there's another command for that. We've got it in a script here, which you can probably find.
Use the dev one here.
Dev. Yep. And that'll just watch for changes for us.
All right, let's do that. Start dev. Nice and handy.
That does come in handy. So that'll go. Maybe hop over to your code editor there, and I'll show you around a little bit.
Yeah, let's do it.
So, have you worked with Angular at all? Like latest Angular?
No, I did one Angular 1 project way back in the day, and then the next project that I took was on React, and I just kind of kept moving the React direction from there. So I'm pretty fresh to. I mean, this is going to be a lot of adventures. Like I've never used Nest. I barely know TypeScript. Don't really know Angular. So we're going like many layers deep here.
That's okay. That's okay. You've had a bit of exposure to TypeScript. At least you're familiar with what it's supposed to do.
Yeah. I mean, I'll probably ask a lot of questions, but that's that's to be expected.
Cool. Yeah. Let's learn. So this project structure that you see here is for Angular developers. They would come to this and they would say, well, this looks pretty familiar. This looks like kind of what I would see in an Angular project if I were to start up a new Angular project with the Angular CLI, for example. And that's intentional. Camille wanted to mirror a lot of the layout structure, et cetera, from Angular so that, for a lot of reasons. One of them is if you're a full stack dev and you're doing Angular on the front end, this is a nice way to not have as much context switching when you're going between the front and the back end. It's nice for that reason.
Yeah.
You can sort of continue where you left off, sort of thing. And some of the patterns here that we see, like app.controller, app.module, these are similar to what we'd see in Angular. In Angular, we'd see app.components as maybe like an entry components. We call them controllers in Nest. But the code that you see here, all this TypeScript, it looks very much like what you would see in Angular.
Okay.
Nest has a dependency injection system, which means if you want to have like a service, maybe something to call out to another API or do some bit of work, you can create a separate service, and then you can just inject it into any of your controllers that you need to use it.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
It's a good way for code dependencies there to manage those. And I guess what I'll point you to is maybe the app module. This is sort of where it all starts. You want to kick off any kind of Angular application and any Nest application, you want to define kind of a root module. And so when you create one with a CLI, it's going to give you this app module. It's exported as a class, and you need to decorate it with the module decorator. And so if you're unfamiliar with decorators, they're basically the @ symbol and then the decorator name with parentheses. You can optionally pass like an object that's got some options. Quite often is what you need. And this is kind of, I mean, it's a deep topic, I suppose, but it's kind of a way to wrap some metadata around your class. So we know that the things that we define in this module decorator apply to this app module class because it sits right above it. So it's kind of one of those things where like the placement does matter.
Yeah, I was noticing that like here, we're specifying things, and it looks like we could pass options in.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and so placement for those decorators does matter. The one for get hello, for example, right there, belongs to get hello because it's placed right above it.
Makes sense.
You can also place them like if you were to pass an argument into get hello or have a parameter there, I should say, and you wanted to use a decorator with it, you would put it right to the left. So another option for placement. So some people look at these decorators and they're like, they look weird. I don't really get it. But I found now that I am used to them, and you do get used to them, they're quite nice. Like it's nice to be able to tell a class or a method or whatever a bunch of what it should do just by being able to slap a decorator on it. Just like
okay.
So back to the app module, and I know I'm kind of rifling through stuff, so please do.
No worries.
Have any questions? So in Angular and again in Nest, we've got a number of things within any given module that I guess you would say they apply to that given module.
Okay.
We've got a number of things that we would want to import. So this would be things like other modules that we may want to use within this module. We're going to see that as we create out a module here for this Graph Collective API. We might want to specify some controllers. So that app controller is kind of, you can think of it maybe as like an entry point that's going to expose various endpoints. It turns out that's what it does. It exposes various endpoints for us.
Got it.
So you want to have any of those dependencies listed there in your controllers array. And so back over to the module, and then providers. This is wiring up the dependency injection system within the framework. So if we have a service that we want to make calls to another API or do something else, we want to list them there. And services are useful because we define them once, and then we can slap them onto any, put them into any controller. We can inject them anywhere and use that same method, for example, from the service. So it's a nice way to kind of piece out your application.
Yeah. And so I feel like this is probably out of scope for what we're trying to do today, but now I kind of want someone to teach me how these work under the hood, like how this is actually implemented. Right. I'm going to make a mental note to come back and do that because this is all very fascinating to me. But I've never really worked with it. So I'm kind of curious just to see like, what is that doing?
Yeah, exactly. For sure. Decorators are a cool topic. The injectable one that you saw just there means that essentially marks it as something that can go into the dependency injection system within the framework. So both in Angular and Nest, that's what we do. We say, okay, this class here can be injected somewhere. It has the stuff it takes to make itself available in any given controller that we might want.
I got you. Okay.
Yeah, so that is the gist of structure. If you go back over to the controller, we can start to sort of reason about this endpoint. So I guess pop quiz for you. What is it that you would say this get hello method is doing just by looking at the decorators and stuff like that?
From what I can tell, we're saying that if we have a GET request, like an HTTP GET, then we would respond here, and I'm guessing that we would pass in, like if this was supposed to be at a route, like slash hello, we would need to pass that in as an argument here somehow. And because this is empty, it runs at root, and that just fires off this next function. Am I
Yep.
am I correct there?
You're 100% right. Your intuition is spot on. It's it's a pattern. I think you probably see that pattern in other backend frameworks and languages where you have route structures are set up by maybe like right on the methods or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, you can give that a shot even if you wanted to.
All right, so that's exciting.
So if we wanted to change this, is it straight up, or am I going to pass in an object?
That'll be a string right there.
Okay, so let's just make it hello. And I want to see, so here this should no longer work if I were to refresh it. But if I do a hello, then I should get that. But then if I go back, it should give me an error, like a 404, yeah. Okay, yeah. So all right, that makes sense. That's pretty intuitive.
I think it gives you the option of having the slash or not the slash. I think you can just
like I could just put in hello?
I think so, yeah. We can prove that out maybe.
Yep, seems to work.
Cool. Yeah, so that's kind of how it works. And then like you can actually also group routes by passing in a string to the controller decorator up above. That'll set up like, well, we can show how it works. If you say hello in the controller, for example, and then down below in the get decorator, you say message maybe as your path there. What this is going to say now is you have to go to /hello/message to actually get that to show up.
Oh, okay. And so then if I were to do something like, let me take this, and I assume this is probably very not acceptable, but if I just do something like this, then I would go to hello message or hello test, and then it outputs test.
You got it.
Okay, so all right, this is starting to make sense. There is a question in the chat. Sure. Nikki's asking, are decorators still experimental? Anything we have to do to get them to work?
Good question. Well, they work in TypeScript if you're out of the box with TypeScript, but I wonder where that is. JavaScript decorators. What's the approval process? TC39 proposal decorators.
Ooh, they appear to just work.
They just
or wait,
work?
hold on. This is just ECMAScript 5. That's not like the full thing.
I see stage 2 on JavaScript decorators within the TC39.
Okay,
repo.
so that is still experimental then, because it's like stage 3 is where things start to show up in Babel by default, I think, and then stage 4 is when it's actually like I think that's what it means.
Gotcha. Okay. So yeah, they're on the way, I guess, but experimental for now.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So back at our code. So this is where you could start to, if you're working in a REST world, you could start to put like a full CRUD operation for a given resource onto a single class, and then you've got your get decorators, and as you might imagine, you've got like a post decorator to respond to post requests, patch, put, delete, etc. Those are all there. So that's a nice way, I think, to build REST APIs.
Can you stack these? Like if I wanted to do like post message, can I do that?
Let's see. Maybe. I haven't tried it before, but let's
see. Does it immediately blow up? Let's go back. Where was it? Hello message. Cannot get hello message.
I guess it may be. Well, it's probably taking the first one, so it might just respond to a post request. So if you can fire off a post request.
Yeah. Okay. Can I do this from memory? Post localhost 3000. Hello, message. Wrong version number. Oh, I did it to HTTPS. That's why. Yeah. Okay. So it works by post, but it only takes the first decorator. So all right, you cannot stack. You would have to do a double declaration.
Yep. Another method with a unique name. So that is if you're building a REST API, that's sort of the pattern you might follow. But it turns out Nest has its own GraphQL layer as well.
Ooh. And
it's something I've used a little bit less, but I figure we'll go through and build it here. I'll sort of point you to how to get started with it. It's a layer on top of Apollo. It's a layer on top of GraphQL tools and ultimately Express. So, Nest sits on top of all these things to give you a nice kind of TypeScript world so that you can kind of, maybe with less code, arguably, you can build these things. And the GraphQL API, some things look similar to what we would, be used to with maybe just straight up Apollo on an Express server. But there are some differences that do come into play.
Okay.
And there's some, as you'll see there from the installation, there's some particular extra bits that you'll need. So maybe grab all that and let's
okay, so I don't need this one anymore. So we'll come back over here, install these. And while we're waiting, we can read up on what's going on. So we can go schema first or code first. That's kind of cool. So schema first is usually where I land because it seems like it's human readable by default, which I like. Yeah. It'll generate our definitions for us. Oh, that's cool. I like that. So it like gives you autocomplete for your schema.
Yep.
That's really nice. Okay, so that's set up. Start the server again. And so now we just pull in the GraphQL module.
Yep, that's the first step. So let's grab that, pull in GraphQL module. That comes from that separate package that you just installed, the GraphQL pieces.
Okay.
For Nest.
GraphQL module from Nest GraphQL.
Yep.
And then we needed to import it somehow.
Yep.
Imports GraphQL module .for root.
Yeah, and so that's a common question that people have when they're coming to Angular or Nest is like, what is all this for root business? Because you'll see that in a lot of places. The method name of for root is kind of just like from convention from when it all started, I suppose, the framework itself. But when you pull in a module and then you call this static method called for root, you are setting up some options for that module to abide by. And so if you've got a library, if you're a library author and you're publishing something to be consumed by anybody, very often you want different options, different configurability for your package. And this is where you typically do it if you are bringing it in through Angular or Nest.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And so basically what we're saying is this is a Nest.js module and we're giving it the behaviors of a GraphQL module by importing them here. Or we're giving it access to the behaviors of a GraphQL module.
I guess you can think of it more as like Nest.js in tandem with their core framework. They've published a separate module that is to be used in a Nest project that is specific to GraphQL. It's a set of GraphQL wrappers and things that make GraphQL behave as it should. And we're telling our core Nest application that we want to use that module with some specific options that we're going to give it.
Okay, so we're making it available inside. It's not necessarily modifying the behavior.
Yeah, I guess you could put it like that. Okay. I mean, the modifications perhaps would come in the options that we set up. But
so I to anthropomorphize this, it's not like putting on a GraphQL hat. It's more like getting a duffel bag with GraphQL in it that it can use. Okay, all right, that makes sense. Let's see how silly I can make the analogies today. Okay, so we've got the ability to use this GraphQL stuff now.
Yep.
And then we need to.
So then this goes into some more detail about other options you might see.
Okay.
And you can, you can set up various things, like you want to turn off the playground or whatever.
Yeah.
It will give you the GraphQL Playgrounds.
That's
if you
cool.
go to a route of /GraphQL. In fact, it'll probably give it to you right now. Let's try it.
Yeah, it should have reloaded, I thought. Uh-oh. Apollo server requires either an existing schema, modules, or type ifs. Oh, we're not set up enough to actually use that yet.
Yep. So let's get ourselves further set up.
Okay.
The way that I found to work best is to jump right into creating a feature module, or maybe you could call it a resource module within our application. So let's grab the command line, and I'll show you Nest. Similar to Angular, has like a great CLI, so you can you can wire up new files very easily. So let's do Nest, and then do G for generate.
Okay.
And then we'll do a module, and let's call it. So I'm calling this resource. I might change this later, but I'm going to call it interviews for now, so we can create an interviews module.
And do you capitalize or okay?
We'll do lowercase there, yeah.
Okay. Anything else?
That should be it. Let's run that and see what we get.
Okay. I have pressed the button.
Boom.
All right.
So over there in the table of contents, you'll see, or the file system, you'll see interviews module.
Cool.
So that's cool. One thing that you can do beyond this, typically if you're creating like a REST API, you'll create a controller file, which is then imported in this module, and this module is exported so that it's imported elsewhere. It's like just modules all the way down kind of thing.
Sure.
One thing you can do is generate that controller on the command line as well. We want something a bit different in this case, and I don't know if this works, but let's try it. Let's experiment. We'll do Nest.js again, and do resolver. And then do, let's call it, what did I want to call it? Interviews resolver, I guess. Same name.
Like this?
Just interviews for that.
Oh, I got you.
I want to see if this works. I don't know if it will. Sweet, I think it does.
Ooh.
So it puts it in the right folder. Wires up some of the scaffolding we need, and then if you look in module,
it even
pulls it into the module.
Wow, that's handy.
Absolutely. So it's going to take care of, like, that might be a task that takes you a minute and a half to do afterwards, if you had to do it by hand.
Yeah.
And those minute and a halves really do add up if you're building something big. So, it's nice.
Yeah. I mean, that's really handy, especially because, like, one of the big complaints you hear about Angular is that it's very boilerplate heavy. And so having a CLI that handles that for you makes that much less of a hurdle.
Absolutely. Yep. So we've got the file that we need for our resolver. We will need another file. Let's do a new file within that interviews directory.
Am I doing this with the CLI or just straight up?
You can do straight up it might be available in the CLI. I don't know, but let's do it straight up. It's easy. Interviews.graphql is the one we'll want here.
Okay.
So I figure maybe what we can do to get started with the schema is I want to send you a link for this data that I've been putting together so that maybe you can look at it and we can show it on the screen a little bit. Should I send that to you in the chat here, or?
In the Twitch chat is great. Or if you want to send it in, if it's something that shouldn't have like a whole bunch of people poking at it, you can send it to me as like a DM on Twitter or something so I can grab it out.
I need to log into Twitch, I guess. So let's do that maybe in Twitter, just so we're quick about it here. Coming at you. People can go to this link. That's no big deal. It's just a GitHub gist. But it does have the
copying the link address, and we'll go over here. Okay, and then I will drop this in the stream.
You'll drop that in? Okay. Awesome. I need to do a little bit more work for this data. It needs a few more things, but I just slapped this together quickly. And, it's got some fake stuff in it, but it does represent the interviews that I've got done. Minus one, I guess. There's one missing. However, why don't we start to build out a schema based on this?
Okay, so let's do this. And so we can call this, you want it to be an interview. So we need an ID. We need a title. Is there anything that you want to be optional?
No, I think we'll do it all. Everything will be required.
Okay. Can you have multiple interviewees, or do you just want one?
We'll just do one. Yeah, so not, actually, I take that back because I do have one lined up soon that will have 2 people. So let's do a list of interviewees.
Okay. And then we need a type for interviewee. And so like this here, for anybody who's not familiar with GraphQL schemas, we're defining out types. These are built in to GraphQL. This is a custom type, so we have to actually define it down here. And then what we're saying here is that you can't return null, but what that doesn't mean that you can't return an empty array. So like there might not be any interviewees, but we can't return like null or an array of null. It would have to be either an empty array or an array of interviewees, or else we'd get an error. Does that in chat ask questions if that doesn't make sense? So we've got a string, got a Twitter, and we've got a bio. Okay, so that should be that. Do I need to define the queries or?
Yep, queries go in here as well. So root query.
Is it root?
Sorry, just query like that. But I guess
Okay.
you're, yeah, you had it right. Type query.
And
So you could do interviews would be our single kind of query for data.
okay.
Thus far, we'll return a list of interview.
And then do you want to, I guess we can probably not get into like deep query design here. Do you want to set up a single one or just?
Yeah, why not? Let's do one as well while we're here.
Okay. And so this one is we're going to go just by ID so that we don't have to do the whole thing. But yeah. So that we'll probably want to get cleaned up to include like search by title or something like that too, but not today. Are we setting up mutations?
No need
Okay.
for mutations.
All right. Cool.
So that looks good. I like it.
All right. So we've got.
So let's hop back over to if maybe one thing we could do actually, if you want to just copy the data that I sent you in that gist, and we can put it somewhere in either the file system in the project folder, or maybe just even within that resolver file for now in an array.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
That might be the easiest thing to do. Maybe just up below the imports. There we go.
Okay, so we've got our interviews.
Interviews are there. So I know there is one thing we've got to do to make that GraphQL file available. If you go back over to the docs quickly, there's like a glob thing that we've got to get. And I think, yeah, there it is. Type paths.
GraphQL module.forRoot type paths. Okay. So that's in here. No. Here. No.
One more down.
Here.
You got it. Yeah. You're getting it.
Type paths. Was it capitalized? Yeah. And then we give it an array, and it was literally anything named .graphql, right?
Yep. It's going to look for all of the GraphQL
Oh,
files.
from here, not everywhere. Okay. So yeah, we want that.
Yeah, it'll look for anything with GraphQL, and that's what it'll consider for putting together the schema, etc.
Okay. So now when we start, theoretically, it has a schema, and so we should be able to see the playground, even though there's no data.
Yes, because we need to set up the resolver to actually resolve that data. But
right.
Let's see if the playground will load.
Playground loads, and does it show us a schema? Show does.
Excellent.
Perfect. Okay. Yeah, so this is great. We've got data in, at least, and it looks like our queries actually work. And if we go to try to write one, it should say, like, we can do interviews, and then we'll try to get the ID and the title and the interviewee. and their name. And it just comes back broken because we don't actually have resolver set up. But the fact that this is auto-completing is very cool that it just picked that up. And let's see. Sorry, there's a question in chat.
No problem.
What do you think about the future of JS? I think that might be a little too big a scope for this particular program. I think we might have to take that on a different day. So we've got GraphQL and we've got things loading. So I assume our next step is to get in here and make this do something.
Yep, you betcha. So do you remember the get decorator that we saw, the post decorator for the REST API?
Yes.
Flavor of things. We got something similar, which intuitively we've got query and mutation for decorators, and we've got a resolver decorator as well, which is already in there. That got wired up via the CLI for us.
So I just pull it in like this?
You got it.
Okay.
So now, given what you know from what we did initially with that get decorator, let's see what you can do here to just sort of go through and maybe make something available as a query.
Okay, let's see how intuitive this API is. So I'm going to try query, and then I'm going to tell it which query I want to use. And then I need to create a function, which I can really call.
In this case, it'll be a method, so you won't key name it with function.
Oh, got it. So it's like that.
Yep.
And then if this works like a regular resolver, which since it's powered by Apollo, I would assume it does. That means that I'm going to get source, context, oh crap. Do they still give you root?
They give you root. I don't know though if that's what we're gonna get through here. I actually haven't tried that.
Okay, so here's what I'm gonna do instead. I'm just gonna log this.
Okay.
So that we can see what comes out, and we're going to return an empty array so that it doesn't explode.
Cool.
Okay. So now we get to find out whether or not that actually works. Holy crap. That's actually really nice how intuitive that was.
Mm-hmm. You got it the first go, basically.
Okay, so first is undefined, so that's the root. This is our source
That's your
module.
args.
Then we
Holy
get,
buckets, did that just work?
I believe, context and then info. So
Yep.
So it's a pretty standard. So we get root, which we don't need, and then we get source, context, info. So in here, we actually don't need any of these because it looks like we're about to hack this. But I mean, I think really we can just return this.
Yep.
Okay, so now if I run this, whoops, interview.interviewee. Oh, I know
Maybe
why.
there's something that's off here.
I know why.
Arrays. Thank you. Also, I noticed on that first one that the description is empty for that first record. If you wouldn't mind just putting in something there.
Yeah, empty should be fine. It's just null that'll break, I think. So I actually kind of
Oh, right. Empty string should be okay.
To verify that, let's actually let this run. Yeah. So it can come back empty. Let's get that description to make sure. Yeah, it can come back empty.
Okay.
So this is pretty slick because it's just kind of opting into the default behavior of GraphQL, which is that if the schema exactly matches the data shape, everything like just works, which is very, very nice. Dang, that was easier than I expected. And then if we wanted to do another one for interviews, we're going to get query interview. And then just call this interview. And, oh, you know what? I think this is args.
Args, yep. There's, as you're doing that, I'm going to look up because I know there's a special decorator that we need, I think, to get the args. And
okay.
I see it here. And in fact, so this is what's interesting. Yeah, this is what's interesting. You know how like if you're doing like a straight up resolver in like Apollo server, you positionally those arguments, those parameters matter. Your first one is parent, your second one is args and context and info. Using the decorators that we've got here, if you just need one of those, if you just needed the info one all the way at the end, you don't have to put the other ones in. So I'll show you how that works. Yeah, so
okay,
grab the args decorator. You can import it, I think, just from the same spot that you do the other ones.
Okay, let me collapse this. Args like so.
Yep.
Okay.
And then in your method there, instead of what you've got, destructuring the ID, take all that out, and even the parent, yep, and then do @args. And pass in what you want, which is a string of ID. That's what we want to get to, the actual argument name.
Like this?
You had it. Sorry,
no?
Just a string of ID. Yeah, you had it.
Okay.
And then beside that, let's do, we kind of have to like, I don't know what you would call it, parameterize it or whatever. So outside of that parentheses you have there, just one space over, put ID again. So this is giving us like a local name for it.
Okay.
And then let's type int it, because we know that it's got to be a certain type, and it's going to be a type of string in this case. Yeah. It's actually an ID like in GraphQL, but for TypeScript's concern, it's like
yeah,
it'll just be a string.
Okay, so I can drop this out too because we're not using it.
Yep.
And that's gonna work.
So what you'll get now is you can just get access to that ID right in that method body.
Yeah, I just have it, right?
Yep, you should just have it now.
Okay, so theoretically this should just work, and I should be able to say I want the ID to be 3. Oh, but I need to make it a string. And then I will just get, I don't know, let's get the title. Wow. Okay, so that's pleasant. I mean, that's pretty handy to have. Dig that. Okay, so I mean, this is definitely like early days, but that was a pretty easy way to build an API. That's for darn tootin'.
Darn tootin'.
Yeah,
it looks different than building out like your typical API with like Apollo server. But it's cool. Like I think it's a nice layer, right? Like it's kind of nice and succinct. Things look intuitive. Thinking about, because one of the big topics, of course, within building a GraphQL server is splitting up your server into modules and having different parts of your schema in different places.
Yeah.
And so there's tools to do that, of course, in other various other libraries that you would use, but you kind of just get it out of the box here.
Yeah, I mean this is very slick. I think the trade-off that we're making here is like, like EcoMath in the chat mentioned, I'm still not sure how I feel about magic decorators, and I think that the cool part about them is that you're able to package up a bunch of stuff that you don't really need to worry about, and just give people these helpful things to make it work. The downside is that there's a little bit of indirection there, where like if you like with the args, for example, like things are being passed into this method, and this decorator is kind of obfuscating the fact that there are positional arguments here. They're just not being used.
Right.
And so I don't know that there's really it's just the trade-offs, right? So this is extraordinarily convenient, but I can see that getting a little bit confusing if you got lost, like if you fall off the happy path. But yeah, exactly. This like in terms of convenience and being able to set something up quickly, this is very nice that this like just works. Do we need to do anything else, or are we ready to switch over and build
ready to rock?
Yeah, let's build a website out of it. All right, so do you have a place you want me to commit this to so that it's...
Let's go to, well, here's a question, actually. I wonder if we can should we do 2 separate repos, I suppose, for these things, or...
Given the way that this thing just set it up, we definitely can, but we could run it out of the same, like we could make it into a mono repo if you want.
Is that fairly approachable in the time that we have now to do? Because we can. What I'll do is I'll do this. I'll set up Graph Collective on my GitHub, new repo, public, create repo.
Are you Ryan Chenkie on GitHub as well?
Just my last name on GitHub.
Oh.
And I will. I'll invite you as a collaborator here.
Okay.
Collaborators. Are you Jay Linksdorf on there?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, and that should have shown up.
Jay Linksdorf. There you are. And collaborator. So you should have an invite there now.
Okay. All right, so now I think what I can do is let's got this. I'm going to get init.
You actually, it should be initialized already.
Yeah, it looks like it was. It said reinitialized. So then I'm going to get remote add origin. Okay. Let's see. It already has a git ignore set up, so it looks like everything that's in here is stuff that we need. Let's do just a quick check there to make sure. These are all files that we want in. I don't see anything that looks like node modules or whatever, so good deal. All right, shipping it.
Ship it.
Okay. And now, so what we didn't do actually, so this is always going to be through /GraphQL. We don't have to set up any like post or get or anything like that.
Yeah. Just post requests straight up to that GraphQL endpoints, and that should do it.
Okay. So now this is pushed up. And you know what I did that was stupid is I did not put that into a subfolder.
Okay, well, we can do it right now if we want.
Yeah, so
how will the mono repo sort of look, I guess, with Gatsby's concern?
I mean, you can do it whatever way you want. Like you could have an API folder and a site folder, and then and then just kind of like in the mono repo move into the subdirectory you want to use and not actually use any mono repo stuff, which might be the easiest way to approach it. Or if you want a legit mono repo, we can just set up Yarn workspaces or I don't know enough about Learn to feel confident setting it up right now. Probably the easiest approach forward would be to either put it in subfolders or use separate repos.
Gotcha. Okay. Let's just put it in subfolders, I think. That works for me.
I can just do that real quick then. Let's make dir API. Do you want to call it API or something else?
API is good. Yep.
Okay. And then I'm going to move readme dist nest, not node modules, or I guess, yeah, node modules, package, source, test, ts everything.
Is there a way to do like select everything to move except for one file or one thing?
Okay, so now should just say that I renamed everything. Uh-oh, did you do the thing where are you trying to add all of node modules now?
Ooh, maybe the ignore.
The git ignore stop working when the, it sure did. Okay, so let's get rid of that. Let's get rid of that. Okay, so we're going to git reset. Check here. And let's see. Okay, so let's git add all again. That's much faster, much better. And this time everything just got renamed. Okay, good deal. Move to subfolder, and then we'll push that.
Your Git game is strong. Messages, know the command line inside out. I am not as good.
So I use this tool called Hub, which is like so good. It just
Hub, okay.
it has like all these controllers for creating and managing. You can set like create pull requests. You can review things. It's very, very powerful for like open source maintainers working on like a lot of Git, especially specifically GitHub because it's a GitHub tool. It's like night and day different.
Nice.
Okay, so now, cool. Yeah, there we go. We've got an API folder. So at this point, if you want, you can, if you want to start sharing your screen. Sure. So I'll stop sharing mine. Please hold while we have minor chaos in the tech shuffle.
I'm just going to get myself set up to do this here. What the best way is. Maybe I'll use this screen just so I'm not going to show a huge screen or anything. Okay, so share my screen. I'm going to share this one. Let me know if you can see this. That's coming through okay.
Okay, and so now I go over here. I can see your screen. I need to change this.
No, this will work. This will work.
Yes.
So that I can show. And this is not ideal because there's a little. Oh no, God, what happened?
Doing okay?
Yeah, everything's fine. All right, so there's a little bit of goofiness where we can kind of like see your screen above your head, but we're gonna just roll with it.
Okay, cool. You see my terminal though?
Yep.
Sweet. Okay. Graph Collective. Let's open this up.
Yeah.
We'll get ourselves going.
They're like, oh, forget Git, just save up. We'll just have like index.js and then index.js.final.reallyfinal v2.
Yeah. That sounds good. Ship it. All right. So I'm gonna, what should I do? CD API, and let's do, I guess we can just do npm start because we won't need to reset this in theory.
In theory.
Oh, I should probably install my dependencies. That would be helpful.
And then
in the meantime,
you'll need, well, you can do it a couple ways. You can either do it as a global install if you want, or we can build your Gatsby site kind of from the ground up. With the CLI, you'll get a lot of things for free, like a git ignore and some of the package JSON setup for convenience.
I like it.
Yeah. So let's do that. Go once you get your stuff installed.
I can open a new one here.
Okay. Do npm i-g Gatsby-CLI. Gatsby. It's TS, yeah.
Gatsby CLI.
That's the one.
Okay. How's that installed? Check on that one.
Question in the chat about showing my screens. I have a streaming PC and I'm using Zoom and OBS. So OBS is what's actually broadcasting, and then I've got Zoom set up, and that's how Ryan and I are talking right now. And we use the screen share so that we can see what each other is doing. Okay. Let's see. So Nest should be good.
Make sure this works here. And over my browser, which you can't see, I'm going to go to local 3000 GraphQL. As soon as it finishes starting, I will do that. In the meantime, I've got Gatsby here.
Okay, so now you can run Gatsby new, and then you wanted it to be called client, so choose the folder name. And then we're going to use a stripped down version, so do Gatsby.js / Gatsby starter, or Gatsby hyphen starter hyphen hello hyphen world.
Okay.
And that'll give us this will give us a really stripped down version, no opinions or anything, so we can oh, interesting. But yeah, so this will give us like the scaffolding we need, but none of it won't inject a styling opinion or any components that we have to get rid of or anything like that.
Okay, awesome.
So because we are not using any image assets or anything, we can just go straight in on the Nest stuff and pull it across directly. And for that, we're going to use something called Gatsby source GraphQL.
Okay.
And so, let's see. Good.
Your
Gatsby,
site has
Gatsby.
been
Dig it. So yeah, if you go into there and then you can run yarn add or npm install, sorry, Gatsby dash source dash GraphQL.
Yes, or SRC.
SOUR, yeah, like fully spelled out. So we do that as a, like the Gatsby ecosystem sets that up as a way to delineate what type of plugin you're installing. So there are source plugins that get data into the Gatsby system. There are transformers that take data from one type to another. And then there are kind of general purpose plugins that do whatever. But yeah, so we're installing a source plugin because what we want to do is we want to add this Nest API as a data source for Gatsby so that we can build pages directly from it. And so what we want to do then is in client, we can create or in the Gatsby dash config,
Gatsby config.
we can replace line 8 with a plugins key. That's going to be an array.
Okay.
And plugins are defined with no options. You can do just a string, but we need options for this one. So we're going to add an object.
Okay.
And the first key is resolve.
Resolve.
And the name of the plugin, so Gatsby source GraphQL.
Gatsby source GraphQL.
The next key is options.
Okay.
And so this is an object. And we're going to pass in 3 things to it. The first thing is a type name. So type capital N name. That's going to be a string. And this is just whatever we want the type to be. So you can call it interviews or interview.
Okay.
And probably cap that. Like it's kind of like, this is the way it's going to work is that Gatsby's going to have a like an interview query and then subqueries underneath that'll be our interviews. So actually maybe what we want to do, because that'll give us like interview. Maybe we want to call this like Graph Collective.
Okay. Kind of a namespace.
Yeah. And then we want a field name, and that typically is just going to mirror the same, so Graph Collective. So this is what's actually going to show up in the GraphQL Explorer. Like this is what we'll type to get at the thing. And then we need a URL. And so the URL is going to be our actual GraphQL API. So in this case, exactly. Okay, so now that we have that, if you want to run Gatsby develop.
Okay. And I've confirmed that my GraphQL API is running.
Excellent. And so then we're going to want to look at the browser, and we can see the GraphQL Explorer in there, which I think it might require you to. Oh, you got it. Okay, cool. So now you can go, if you want to open a new tab, you can do localhost 8000 / /GraphQL.
Interesting.
And we do that to avoid collisions where you would have that. Now, what I really like about this is I saw you had an interview with Sean Grove, so you may have already been familiar with his work on the GraphQL Explorer, but I love this feature. So on the left, we can just click around and get the data that we just imported.
Did that just work?
Awesome. Yes, this is really cool. Boom.
There we go. So now it's part of Gatsby. We can use it as part of our build system.
So how does it work in the end? Because Gatsby, you're building a static site.
Mm-hmm.
Does this data like get bundled for that static distribution, or are we talking to a live server in the end? How does that?
So what'll happen is that we're running all these queries at build time, and the results of those queries get triaged down into like JSON files. And so those get bundled together with the components that actually use that data, so that it loads the data from the file system at load time, the same way that it would from a server at runtime. But we eliminate the server round trip so that it's just like there and available.
Sweet. Okay.
But yeah, so now that we've got this, we can actually build some stuff with it. So the first thing we'll probably want to do is just put together like a home page, and our home page will list the interviews. So if we go to the VS Code again, then we can create in source, or actually I think we'll just be editing in source pages index. We can write our first query. So up underneath React on line 2, let's import as a named import GraphQL from Gatsby. Yeah, just lowercase GraphQL, perfect, from Gatsby.
Okay.
And then you can choose to do this whichever way you want. I usually put the query first so that I see the data before I see the component that uses it. But we're going to export a const called query.
Okay.
The name itself doesn't matter. It just needs to be exported. And then GraphQL is a template tag. So we're going to do a tag template literal. And inside of it, we just write our GraphQL query. So whatever data you want to show from the interviews, we can just pull it here. So typically what I would do is just write the query in the GraphQL Explorer and then copy paste it in.
Gotcha. Okay. So maybe we just grab a list of the interview names and descriptions for the homepage.
That's probably what I would do, yeah.
Yeah, iterate. When you're doing, is there any particular best practice or recommendation for how you write your queries here? Like, are we wanting to do like query and then open? Is it anything that's particular?
Yeah, I mean, there's like I typically do query just to signify whether it's that we are writing GraphQL, but it's very much a like whatever you want. So yeah, we can get the title and description, and then.
Do you know of any? Sorry to interrupt. The one thing I've been wondering about recently is there any VS Code plugin which will give you IntelliSense for your queries right within? Like if I started typing out description, it'll tell me.
So for Gatsby, I don't think so, but I know that like the Prisma team has done that, but they do it. Everybody does it with TypeScript. Basically, you generate your schema into a thing, and then that becomes available. But you have to have the schema available. The things that I've seen for VS Code that you have to like download the remote schema, and then it gets put into VS Code as like a thing, and so they do work. But I personally haven't set one up because it's always been such a pain, which is a lot of why I go into the GraphQL Explorer and just like build my query there and then copy paste. I'm like, whatever. Yeah. I'm not gonna worry about VS Code for this. But so once we get this, what'll happen is at build time, Gatsby is going to recognize that this query is here. It'll extract it, execute it, and then inject it back into this component as a data prop. So on line 12, our component is going to get as an argument. How much React have you written?
A fair bit.
Okay, so I won't so we're going to get a data prop basically. And
is it going to come through like we destructure it,
exactly,
or is it just like
So it'll be like props.data. And then inside of here, we can just write up like maybe an unordered list or something to put these out. So if we put in we can.
I am seeing an error, which maybe we can address after. It looks like there's something wrong with.
Oh yeah, so remember it's nested inside of the Graph Collective, like field.
So what do we do for that? We just go Graph Collective at the top?
Yep, and just wrap the whole thing.
Got it. Cool.
And there it goes, no errors. So now we can, it's going to be like data dot graph collective dot interviews, and we can just map.
Collective interviews map. We take an interview. I don't know how you feel about this. Whenever I have like, cause I like doing single letter callback sort of arguments like this, but if it's ever, and I always so like if this was something else like that started with the letter, I don't know, C or whatever, I would use a C here. But I don't like doing it for the letter I for some reason. I don't know if that's because like for loops.
Yeah, the associated with an index.
Something like yeah.
I have I personally I'm like all about verbose variable names.
Gotcha.
So I very rarely use single letter variables. But you know, I don't think there's any inherent problem with it.
Okay. So why don't we see if we get the title? This looks a bit weird.
Something went wrong. What is it doing? Map interview.
Oh, maybe it's because I need to return.
Oh, yeah. There we go. And to avoid a React complaint, we probably want to grab the ID and just inject it as a key on those LIs. Or the index, whatever you want.
Yeah, let's do ID, I guess. That's probably better anyway. Key, right? That's
and then we just got to grab that in the query as well.
Good call. Okay.
So now if we go look at localhost 8000, we should have a list.
Woo!
Boom.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So then the next thing that we'll need to do is actually create pages out of these. And we can do this a number of ways. The first thing that we probably want to figure out is how you want to structure your URLs, because we're going to have to give them like page identities.
Okay. What's a good way? I guess maybe like it'd be nice to give them like a slug based on the title instead of just an ID.
Yeah. So there's, I believe there's like a library called Slugify. And you can just drop the title in and it'll give you back a kebab case.
Right.
So if you want, we can use that.
Sure, let's do it. npm install Slugify.
Okay, so to actually create these, what we're going to do is jump into, we're going to create a new file actually. Next to Gatsby config, we're going to create one called gatsby-node.js.
Gatsby Node.js.
And so Gatsby has 3 different config files that we can use to access runtime APIs. There's a browser runtime APIs, there's a like node build time APIs, and then there's server-side rendering APIs. So we're using node APIs because what we want to do is create pages. So this gives us access to like, we can mess with the data layer. We can do things before we start, after we start. Specifically, we're going to use an API called create pages, which will allow us to create custom pages. So this uses CommonJS. So we're going to do exports.createPages, and pages is camel cased.
Exports.createPages.
And that's going to be equals a function. And I would make this async for ease. So sorry, yeah. So like async, and then I would just use fat arrow syntax for the ease of use here. And so inside that function, we need to do 2 things. First, we need to load data. Then we need to use the data we've loaded to create pages. So Gatsby is going to give us 2 helpers to do that. And they'll come as a destructured first argument in this fat arrow. So the first one is going to be GraphQL. That's a function that'll let us load data. And then we get an object called actions that we can use to do stuff with that data. So in the body of our function, the first thing that we will do is create a const called result. And that's going to be the result, await GraphQL. And this is an actual function. So inside the parentheses in a template literal, we are going to fire off a query. And so typically what I would do in this case is I would get like an ID and the slug. But since we're going to build the slugs on the fly, we'll get the title.
Okay. So is this, I should just check though. Are we doing like we did the tag template?
No, this is it's a little confusing. So in this context, when we're doing node, it's a function and it returns a promise. In the build system, we use that tag template literal so that our AST Explorer can find those queries and execute and replace them with the result. At this time, though, we're actually running it at the time that it's executed.
Gotcha. Okay.
So yeah, in this one, we'll just add a query, and it's going to be the GraphQL collective, and then interviews, and I would say we just need the ID and the title.
Okay.
Okay, so down below this, we are going to just do like a quick check, like if result.errors.
Should I do result and result? Is it like, would it be?
Result should always come back. Well, I mean, I've never seen it not come back, but I guess that's possible. So we can just do like a console.error if something goes wrong. Eventually you'd want to add actual logging here, but I would just put the errors in there, or yeah, that's fine. And then below that, assuming everything has worked here, we can just say like extract out our interviews. So like do a const of interviews, and that'll be result.data.graphql graph collective.
You gotta be typing into GraphQL collective.
I know, man. Dot interviews.
Not interviews.
So now what we're going to do is loop over these. So we'll do an interviews dot for each. We don't actually return anything. So, and for each interview, we're going to use that actions object.
Actions comes from there. Okay.
Yeah. So you can just, I would do inside the body of the function. We don't really need to return anything. So actions dot create page.
Actions create page.
Yep. And that's going to be a function that takes an object, and the object has three arguments. The first one is a path.
Can I do it like this, like destructured, or is it should it?
Yeah, that's no, that's there. No, it's an object. So the first,
right.
yeah, the first key is path. And that's going to be like where we want this thing to live. So that would be the path is going to be our. Sorry, so it's just an object. So we're doing like path, colon, and then a value.
I don't know if I understand. So
okay, so inside a create page, yeah, open up an object.
Oh, okay.
Okay, and then do path.
We're just doing it.
Yep.
I see.
And then this is where we'll want to import Slugify. So we'll probably want to just grab that up above, like const Slugify equals require Slugify.
It's not auto-completing. Interesting. Okay, Slugify.
Yeah, and then we're going to Slugify the title. So it'll be interview.title. And then the template, we have to build this still, but we can specify where it's going to be. So yeah, template, or it's called component, sorry. And that is going to be, I would use require.resolve. And
resolve.
Yeah, and then we'll do that's a function. So inside parentheses, we'll pass a string path to where it's going to live. So relative here. So like ./template/interview.js or something.
./source like that.
Yep, and then we haven't created this yet, so you can put this wherever you want. Convention is I always put these in a templates folder, and then name it like interview or interview template for whatever it is that I'm creating. .js.
Okay. .js. So that should work.
Yeah. So we'll have to create that before we actually try to run this, and then the last thing that we're going to put in is context, and context is something that we get access to in the template itself, so that when we're passing in these pages, we want to run a query to get more page data. Or more data about these interviews, but we need to know which one it is. So if we put something in the context, we can access it as a GraphQL variable. So we're going to pass in the interview ID. So it's an object. And then we choose a key. I think ID is reserved, so let's do interview ID. And then pass the interview.id. And now we'll have in our page template, we can use a GraphQL variable of interview ID.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
I think it'll probably come together too once we go to the template and see.
Yeah. So let's create that template. This is it. This will create our pages. So
Okay.
now let's go create source templates and interview.js.
Okay.
And in here, we're going to import React.
React from React.
I think it's capped.
Is it capped?
It's
Yeah,
usually
I thought so.
capped, yeah. I've never actually tried not capping it, but I assume it wouldn't work. And then we're also going to import that GraphQL. I mean, honestly, you could probably grab most of index.js, just copy it, and we'll just modify what we need to.
Okay.
So up here in the query, we're going to have access to that that variable. So after the query, we can say interview ID is a string. So we're like on line 5, like you know how you declare a GraphQL variable in a query.
Right.
So we're just going to do that, and we're going to use the interview ID.
Right here?
Yep.
Okay. So
And-
interview ID.
Mm-hmm. But with the $sign, because it's
Oh, yes. Interview ID.
yep, and that'll
You
be
type it.
yeah. I think it's a string. It might yell at us for not being an ID.
Okay.
We'll just have to try that and see. And then we're gonna write on line 7. We'll change this over to interview, and use and just use that ID as our filter. So ID without a $sign. And I believe that'll just work. So what I usually do to start is I'll just like dump it in a pre-tag.
Yeah.
So I'll just grab that data and dump it in a pre-tag with like JSON stringify so that I can see what came out. And then I'm confident that it's working.
Did you know about this? Maybe this is obvious, but I remember when I learned about this, it was cool to like indent.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite little productivity hacks. But yeah, it's so useful and so much harder than it needs to be.
Needs to be
Uses ID. Okay, so now that should be working. So if you,
That worked?
yeah, so we need to stop and start the server because we haven't, whenever you change the node file, that needs to be stopped and restarted because it only executes when you first start development.
Ah, yes. Yep. Like an environment file, kind of like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So it looks like we're good, I think. Well, it's still running.
Getting there, and now we got it running. So if you go to localhost 8000, okay, we're good. Go to localhost /404 or just a nonsense string.
Like this localhost, but
We're
like
we're
whatever.
specifically trying to trigger a 404. Yeah. So now we can see that our pages got created. So if you click into one of those, there we go. We got data. So
Awesome.
now, at this point, there are a couple things that we'd want to do. We probably want to make that Slugify go lowercase and remove the special characters. Those are settings in Slugify. But the more important thing is we probably want to get to the point where we can navigate between these. So let's add, let's go back to our index.js and let's add links.
Index.js, add links.
So we're going
I assume
to,
that's simple.
yep. So we're going to import 2 new things. The first one is we're going to import link as a named import from Gatsby. And that's a component.
Gatsby.
Yeah. So it's a capital link. And then the other one is we're going to import Slugify because we're going to use it the same way both places.
I wonder if Slugify is good with.
It should be. I was looking at it. I believe it works in both.
Okay. It's not complaining. Hopefully that's a good sign.
Yeah. And then I'm looking at, it looks like there are some options we can send in if we want to make it lowercase and stuff. Let's get it working first, and then we'll go back and fix it.
Sure.
So we can now add the link component.
Just kind of wrap this in a link, I assume.
Yep. And instead of using an href, we'll use 2.
Okay. Is this React Router under it? Or
It is.
it
Well, it's reach router under it. And so we'll use pass in Slugify of interview title. And that should work. So let's go check our localhost 8000. And now we should be able to click through. Excellent.
Amazing.
And then what we would do on the pages themselves is we would just do a link back to home. to pass that through.
Okay.
So then let's make these slugs a little less terrible. So in Slugify, we're going to pass in an object, and we want the argument that we need is there's a remove, which accepts a regular expression. And I think what we want is so I'll just add remove, and then set up a regular expression like a global one. So //g at the end. Yeah, and we're going to pass in \w.
Like that?
Capital W. Sorry, that's my fault. And use a backslash, like the opposite direction of slash.
Right there, right?
Yeah.
Where did I get it?
So that regular expression means anything that is not a letter or a number, remove it. And because actually, yeah, we also need to include spaces. So just right after the W, add like legit, just hit the space key.
Cool.
Okay. So then on the next line down, the next argument is lower, and we can just set that to true. Sweet. Yeah. All right. So we need to set those same options in Gatsby node. So because of this, what we would probably want to do in a more like permanent sense, I guess, it'll be in the Gatsby. Oh, you're doing it here. Got it. Okay. Yeah.
I set it up in Gatsby node there, and then I've got it here. But yeah, I think I know where you're going. You're saying like if we were to, we really should make like a wrapper for this that has the arguments we want.
Yeah. And so there are ways that we could do this. Like the easiest one would be to have the API return a slug, and then like Gatsby's not making business decisions about how the API works. Right. That would be probably the simplest way to solve that problem. Another option would be we could use Gatsby's data layer. Like if we didn't have access, then we would be able to do like, did those do what we wanted? They totally did. Excellent. So the other thing we could do is we could go into Gatsby and we could like define a custom resolver for the interview type and like have it run Slugify for us and then get a slug. But that, because we have access to the API, that's probably not the best idea. So what I would say we probably want to do instead is like, we can just go in here and take the, in the Nest API, we can just Slugify the title or manually set a slug if you want.
Yep. That's
but anyways, for all intents and purposes, we just like in the span of right on the button, 90 minutes.
Right on it.
We were able to put together an API using Nest.js, which was super cool. And then we were able to put together a Gatsby site using that Nest.js API, which is, I mean, that's pretty awesome. So
pretty awesome indeed.
Yeah. So Ryan, what I'm going to do now, I'm going to switch back over to my screen, and I'm going to start showing your links. So first, we've got twitter.com/Ryan Chenkie. So that's one place that everyone should go to find you. Where else should people go?
You can go if you're interested in getting started with GraphQL, or you've got friends, colleagues that want to get started. You can actually get to it there, Jason, right in my pinned tweet, I think. I see a little bit of it right there. It's called Try GQL. So there we go, trygql.com. You can get some GraphQL sort of intro material there.
Cool.
What else? I do a podcast on kind of business plus coding. So if you're an entrepreneurial type, if you want to maybe do like a side hustle, do your own product, it's at Coder Podcast on Twitter. So the Entrepreneurial Coder Podcast. You can check that out. Lots of cool interviews there.
Nice.
Twitter is kind of where I hang out. That's probably about it.
Awesome. Well, Ryan, thank you so much for coming on. This was a lot of fun. And it was kind of fun because like it's actually been a while since I've done just a Let's Build a Website stream. So this was very nice for me. Like, how'd you feel about it, chat? I felt pretty good. And with that, I think we're gonna roll on to the next thing. Awesome. Everybody, thank you very much. Ryan, thank you so much for coming on. Chat, stay tuned. We have some good stuff coming up this week. I have a part 2 of my generative data visualization stream with Shirley Wu. That one is going to be super fun. So last time we live streamed from Shirley Studio in San Francisco and came up with like what data we needed and what we were going to visualize. This time on Friday, we're actually going to like do that. We're going to write the code in D3 to build generative data visualization. So we're making a holy bucket based on episode stats. So that's going to be really, really fun. Definitely stay tuned for that. Lots of good things happening. So, hit that follow button on Twitch and subscribe if you want special emotes and all those fun things. Until next time, we will, I don't know, stay frosty, stay, I don't know. I thought I was going to come up with a tagline today. It didn't work.
Stay cool.
All right, y'all. We'll see you next time.
See ya.